Now, here we are with Molly Ketcham. Hey, I'm so glad to have you on today, Molly. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Oh, well, this is one of those moments where I forgot to press record. Forgot to go live. So, Molly has been talking to me for like the last 10 minutes. And I realized that I didn't go live. So here we are. Here we are live.
That's okay, Brian. I'm happy to share my story again.
Bring it on. Bring it on. Tell me, when is the first recollection that you have of having a setback, and how did you come back from that setback?
Great question, Brian.
Hey, it's almost like we talked about this.
My biggest setback in life was my divorce. My divorce came after my 20s, after when growing up, I didn't know myself very well. I didn't know who I was, really what I wanted out of life. Kind of had an idea. It was that picture that everybody else paints for you, right? My parents said you go to college. Well, and the idea that I had in my head, you get married, you have kids, you have a white picket fence and a couple dogs. And this was the image that I had of what I wanted, but I didn't really know what I wanted. I ended up marrying the wrong person. He wasn't a good fit for me. In our 20s, we just coexisted. But the realization became part of my reality once we had a baby. And at that time, I had just turned 30 years old. We had a baby. I was starting to figure out that things just weren't quite right. But I was not a very strong, independent woman. And so at that time, it took me a while to really figure out what was going on. My son was 3 years old by the time that we came to the conclusion that it was divorce. But it didn't end there, like the setback. It was debt. I was in debt because we couldn't afford to live on my own. And depression set in. And I felt like I lost a lot of years to that darkness. So when I look back on all of my experiences, I would say that divorce was my biggest setback. But it was also the catalyst for my biggest comeback. It was through that time that, like many of us, when we have a life event, it causes us to reflect. So in my reflection and thinking back to how did this happen and who am I really and what is it that I want from here moving forward? Where am I going? What do I want? And that caused me created this feeling of wanting to learn more about myself. So the concept of self-awareness set in, and I went to work and I spoke with friends and with counselors, and I read books and I took courses online to really dig into who I am. And that was the beginning of the happily ever after, I would say.
Awesome. If you want to hear more, stay right there. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome.
This is awesome. And you did it twice, which is even better. But they don't know that. All they heard is one. So tell us more.
And the second version was even better. So there we go. Oh, Brian, that self-awareness was such a huge turnaround for me, a turning point, because when I started to discover who I was as a person and what I really wanted out of life, it gave me confidence. And growing up with those insecurities and the low self-confidence, I kind of didn't know what I was missing not having it before. But now, looking around and not wondering what people are saying about me or why they're not including me in a group conversation, like that was huge for me to experience. So in terms of and that's where my message comes from. That's where my passion comes from, because learning about myself, I also learned what I'm most purposeful, like what is the purposeful work for me, what I find most passionate in life. And, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a teacher. And, my mom was a teacher. I was always the teacher's pet. And I thought, I want to be a teacher. But then you grow up and, teenage years and you have different interests. And I went a different route. But having, that going back, and again, I'm reflecting, right? So I'm thinking back to who was I really when I was a little kid. That was another contribution to my self-awareness. I realized I can still be that teacher. It doesn't need to be in the classroom, but I can be a teacher and share this message, which I feel very passionate about, which is discovering who you are. Because once you know who you are, all of the doubt fades away, decisions become easier and quicker, and you move forward in a more content, relaxed sort of manner in life. And I want everybody to experience that. And everyone who's not. Some people are fantastic, but for those who might have been in my shoes, I want to help.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love that message. So, I remember being like you at one point where, you always assumed somebody else was talking about you, or when they weren't talking to you and they were talking to somebody else. I mean, that whole thing gets in your head. It really screws you up. So there's lots of things that can screw us up if we don't have that self-awareness. And so how did you get to a point where you understood what you even thought about self-awareness? How did you get to the point where you knew that?
It started with just reflecting through the divorce, right? Just thinking about how did this happen and who am I? And then when I discovered books and courses and things that could actually help me dig deeper, I kind of say at the top with understanding my values and really getting clear on what it is that I value. Because once you know what you value in life, that helps make those decisions easier, right? Because you move in that direction. I dug deeper into my intrinsic motivations. What is it that really drives me to do something? And what are those things? And can I do more of that in my life? Like, let's add more of those easy motivators into my life. And then I went even further into my belief system. And now it's not easy when you start to dig into some of those beliefs and really lay it out on the line. This is who I am. But the fascinating thing that I discovered after a few years of just exploring, because once I got curious, then I just became more curious and learned more and more. But the fascinating thing was that the more that you learn about yourself, actually, the more you learn about other people. And so my interactions and my dealings with other people became easier because I wasn't so frustrated and I don't understand. And, just became easier to work with other people and kind of understand where they might be coming from. Again, another thing that just makes life easier.
So was that a part of a specific test, a specific assessment you did when you got to the point where you understood how different people worked?
Yes. Yeah. Well, yes, because the way that you operate, let's say that I work best. Let's say I focused best when I'm on the phone by walking around my house. But other people focus best when they're on the phone by doodling. If I'm in a conversation with another person and they're sitting across from me and they're doodling on their paper while I'm talking, I might consider it, if I was unaware, that it's, I might think, oh, that's rude. Why aren't they paying attention to me, right? But because I know how I focus, I know that other people focus differently. And so there's where that understanding comes in.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it does make life a lot easier, but the confidence, I think, was my biggest achievement. And I do want to share that when I was learning this, my son was young, and I never learned how to kind of put my words to my feelings when I was little, right? But I was learning as an adult, so I wanted him to learn at a young age. So I started teaching him everything I was learning 30 years later. And he is now 16 years old and the most self-assured, confident, easygoing teenager that I've ever met. And I'm a little jealous, but I'm very proud of the person. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And you did that. You probably did that not knowing you were doing that, but you did that, and you made a big difference in his life. So now you want to make a difference in lots of people's lives.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I see a need, or I have a desire to share this message of really digging in and knowing who you are in order to build that confidence with adults, because I'm sure there are other people like me out there who could still use this information, this message, and maybe spark some curiosity there in them. But to be honest, I love what I have seen in my own son, and I would love to teach it to young children as well. I'd love to teach it to adolescents before we hit puberty, before we really start looking around and comparing ourselves to, she has prettier hair than me and he's a better athlete than me. Before we get to that point, I would love to help them build some awareness about their own strengths, so that when she has prettier hair than me, but I'm a really great artist, and so maybe there's a little less comparing when we get to that age.
Yeah. So if you're anybody listening, what you described are some things that are in the Wink workbook. The Wink workbook is something that I put out, so you can download that and have that too as well. And I'll put that in the show notes. But what tools did you have what tools do you have that you work with people on those sorts of things?
So when I did my own exploration, and I mentioned some of the things earlier, just a few topics of things that I touched on, my values and motivators and belief system and my strengths and my weaknesses, and understanding how other people also perceive me. I have created a training program that helps other people do that same thing. So I use my own experiences and I pull from resources, the LinkedIn Learning, the books. Tasha Eurich is an author on the top. Are you familiar with her?
Yeah, I've got her book.
Okay, yep, on self-awareness. And so there you go, Insight. That's a good one.
Is there more than this? Just this one?
She has two books. That I also read that second book, Insight. But yes, so she speaks on the topic of self-awareness, and Gemma Lee Roberts is the trainer speaker who I've learned a lot through the LinkedIn program on self-awareness. And she had a whole program when the coursework that you go through. There's also, I love oh my gosh, her name is escaping me at the moment, but she wrote The 4 Tendencies, and this is a way to really understand who you are. And so it's a little bit beyond just a personality test. It's like really digging into what you believe and how you operate in the world. And And that's, so I've taken all of that material that I've learned with the things that have impacted me the most, and that's the program that I've created for others to do. And we can go through it in workshops and coaching. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've taken bits and pieces. If we're talking to a middle schooler or somebody pre puberty, what do you say with them?
Well, Brian, that is something that is still a dream for me. That is something that I have yet to achieve, but it's on my radar because it is truly a deep passion for me.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'll let you know. How about an update later after we've created it?
You're going to come back on the show.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. So, I mean, you've obviously taken from Tasha or learned from Tasha. You've learned from others, and then you put that all together into one coursework, or how does that work?
I conduct self-awareness workshops. So small groups, and what I've learned is that people really enjoy not only learning from me, but learning from each other. So we keep the workshop groups very small and intimate so that people are comfortable sharing with each other. That's one aspect of how I use self-awareness and teach self-awareness. The other aspect is through my speaking and training engagements, and I weave little messages of self-awareness through the topic of really developing relationships with others. Because when I had this turning point and I learned how to interact better with others and how others worked, I was able to capitalize on this connection. Like when we're truly connected, we have something in common, or we're sharing a moment together, there's trust that develops from that connection. And with that trust, you have more influence, you have more impact on others. And I see a big need for that in the workplace. So I teach in the workplace, I talk about how to truly connect with another person. But again, the foundation is self-awareness. So I take messages of self-awareness and I weave them into, like, okay, on the surface, like let's get down to details. When you're having a conversation with someone, what do you say? How do you truly find that connection and know who you are and understand who the other person might be? So those are the two different ways that I currently teach the self-awareness.
Have you looked at DISC and other assessments like that?
I have taken the DISC assessment, like I've taken them myself, and I think that they're a great tool. I haven't used one yet in terms of, the self-awareness, but I will say that I did take that test during my exploration phase, and it was very helpful. So I recommend it.
Huh. Okay.
The other one, Brian, I will say was like an eye opener for me was Clifton's Strengths Finder. And the concept that when you capitalize or when you really focus on what you're good at, you have more fun in life, right? Like I'd rather do something that I'm good at than try to constantly improve and focus on the things that I'm not good at. It's always good to be aware of those things, but let's live in our strengths. Let's have some fun and contribute to the world in that manner. What we're good at.
Wow. Yeah, you've given me lots of ideas, lots of things to think about. So obviously my self-awareness could be better. I think we all could be better.
Yeah.
What do you tell people when you learn or when they learn that there's holes that they need to have filled, or they can have filled if they want to?
And are you talking about the holes in terms of things we might not know about ourselves?
Yeah, blind spots.
Blind spots. Yeah, we all have them. If when you grow up and you live this world, you're seeing things through your perception, your eyes only. So it's not until someone else offers you some some feedback in terms of what you might be missing. Otherwise, you don't know it, right? And so the confidence really comes in. I will say that I needed to develop that confidence before I was open to hearing things that, ways that I might not come across great. And the confidence, though, like, it helps you bounce back quicker when you have that. So in terms of, your blind spots or learning more about yourself, I thought fantastic. I experienced this exercise called the reflected best self exercise. It's a study that some folks at the Harvard University conducted originally. And it's where you ask all of your colleagues, your friends, your family, people who know you in different aspects of your life for feedback about what you are good at, how they perceive you, and how you might grow, right? And it's not always easy to ask someone for that feedback. But once you get into the habit and you realize that you can learn from how they perceive you or their dealings with you, as long as you keep that growth mindset of things are always improving and we're always learning and we're only human, then it's great to add those tools to your arsenal of self-awareness. For those people who work in the office and work with clients or work with customers or colleagues even, I love to encourage them to ask the question, how did this project go with me? Like, is there anything that you would suggest we do differently next time? And it's just an easy way to get that feedback of how you might improve and where some of those blind spots may be. So always asking just easy little questions. If you get into the habit of it and keep it going, then it's pretty simple to do.
Wow, well, that's cool. So who sees your blind spots?
Well, I will say the person that I go to the most for that kind of feedback is my husband. And who better to be completely honest with you than your teenage son, right?
All right.
Do you know, one time I walked to the basement where my son was hanging out. This must have been a couple of years ago. So he was still pretty old, I guess you could say, 14 years old, had a mind about himself. I said, Adam, what is one thing that you think that I do well as a mom? And ironically, do you know, I can't think of it right now. And you know what this reminds me of? Every time we have a performance review in the office, our manager gives us and they list out 20 things that we do great. And then they tell us one way we might improve. What do? We walk away from that and we remember that one thing, right? But then I asked him the question, how do you think I could improve as a mom? And he gave me his candid feedback. I think that you could let me stay up later at night. But you know what? This was a great talking point. This was a great, well, why do you think that you could stay up later at night? How do you perform the next day when you get a certain amount of sleep? And it was a great opportunity for him to learn a little bit more and for me to maybe relax a little on the bedtime. Nice. Because that's what parenting is all about. It's a little give and take, right?
That's good. Yeah. I love it. Wow. Believe it or not, we're at the end of our time already, which is amazing. But tell me or tell us what would you leave us with if you wanted to leave us with one thing?
I would say that if you want to feel more confident and more purposeful in life, dig deep into who you are. Every opportunity that you question something, that you hesitate, ask yourself why. Why am I hesitating? And how could I do this better the next time? There you go, Brian.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. And I'm going to let you go to the green room for a little bit. You're going to hang out there. I'll have plenty of green M&Ms, but I'll be there in a little bit.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brian.
All right. Thanks. Bye. Wow. What a great conversation with Molly Ketcham. I had no idea she was so much into self-awareness and looking into ourselves, much like Tasha Urich did with her book, Insight. So phenomenal. Great conversation. Looking forward to having more of those with you. And on probably on Wednesday, we're going to have another conversation. We're going to be talking about that one area where you have a bounce back. You're able to bounce back from your setback. So understanding how that can happen, understanding you focus on those 7 different principles that we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about one specifically on Wednesday, but really understanding that aspect of life, if you can really focus on that and try to do better at that, maybe journal about that, do all the things that Molly mentioned, that'll help you to get along farther in that way. So anyway, that's what I wanted to leave you with today. Hopefully you're able to join us back again on Wednesday for that conversation, that little workshop we're going to do. But if there's ever anything else that I can do for you, please don't hesitate to let me know, and Molly as well. If there's any questions you have, let us know. We'll talk to you soon. And as always, keep one eye on the road. Thank you.